Hey guys, welcome back to We're Talking Movies. This is Cade, joined by Andrew, and this is going to be our review for Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost from 1999. Andrew, do you want to start off with our pros?
Yes, and let me start off with one of my pros, which is just the setting for this movie, actually. Oak Haven, fictional town in Massachusetts. It's a great setting for a Scooby Doo movie. Small town Massachusetts with deep rooted ties to witchcraft, and it takes place in the fall. How much more of a perfect setting for a Scooby Doo story can you really get? And then this is maybe just the New Englander in me speaking, but it just feels kind of special to me in particular.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really like the setting for this movie too. I liked Oak Haven as a town. I thought it looked really nice. I thought the artwork on it was really good. And, regarding how it's a good place for a Scooby-Doo story, it's also just a great setting for a Halloween story in general.
Yeah, I want to bring up another pro, and weirdly enough, this is a pro we've actually talked about in another review. When we covered Scooby Doo on Zombie Island, one of my biggest pros was just the classic Scooby Doo humor, and we get a hell lot more of that in this movie. This also has a lot of that classic kind of half slapstick, half physical humor that Scooby Doo is kind of known for. Some of my favorite examples are Scooby and Shaggy adjusting their stomachs to look more attractive to the Hex girls. The last tire on the Mystery Machine blowing after Shaggy, talks about, "Hey, we still got one left." And then Shaggy and Scooby Doo threatening the giant turkey with a baster and stuffing while dressed as pilgrims. It's all so classic and it's all still so funny.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think another pro for me is just I do like the plot of this movie. I like how the first half of the movie plays out like an old school Scooby-Doo mystery that slowly evolves into something more supernatural. We see the gang uncovering all these clues supposedly linked to the ghost of Sarah Ravencroft. We see this when they're investigating the attacks and they find the flash powder residue and the cherry picker. But as the story unravels, specifically, as we approach the third act and discover Sarah Ravencroft's spellbook, that's when it becomes more of a supernatural story. Actually, fun fact for anyone who might not know about this, the original ending was supposed to end with the witch being unmasked. The studio originally didn't want any supernatural elements in the movie, but the creative team found the ending unsatisfying and they were able to rewrite the third act, and that's when they introduced the ghost of Sarah Ravencroft. So that is something that I do enjoy, just how the plot starts out as one thing, but then it slowly becomes something else.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty solid first twist. We'll talk about the other twist in a minute, but I can find it pretty solid. I love it when it's like group efforts behind these mysteries. And then you also mentioned Sarah Ravencroft. I need to bring up the fact that, in my opinion, she's a massive pro in this movie. I think she's a great villain. Scooby Doo doesn't tend to tackle actual supernatural monsters too often, but when they do, it always seems to hit really well. Again, Zombie Island is another great example of this. But when it comes to Sarah Ravencroft, I love her design. I love the kind of cross between almost like Romani gypsy garb and classic witch garb. I think Tress MacNeille does a brilliant job voicing her with this very almost very sinister, ghostly cackling voice she has. And even with a relatively short on her screen time, because she's only in this movie for the last 15 minutes, and they do a great job in that time establishing how powerful she really is. Also, bonus points for what I think is a really nice touch, which is having her speak in only Old English, because that's all she would know. So I thought that was just a really nice detail that they didn't need to include, but I'm happy they did.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, just the performances in general, I think are a big pro. Scott Ines does a great job as both Scooby and Shaggy. Frank Welker is always great as Fred. I think Jennifer Hale and Kimberly Brooks and Jade Wineland did a great job as the Hex Girls. And actually, I want to highlight my favorite performance in the movie, and that is Tim Curry as Ben Ravencroft. During most of the movie, he does such a great job portraying Ben as this kind and somewhat charming person who's committed to proving the innocence of his ancestor, Sarah. However, when we finally discover his true intentions to free her from the book, he of course knocks it out of the park with his performance. And I mentioned before when we were rewatching this, you can kind of tell that Tim Curry was having such a blast in the role.
Oh yeah, he really was. I mean, Tim Curry always knocks it out of the park when he does voice acting work, and this is no different. Another pro I need to bring up is just I really like the addition of the Hex Girls into the Scooby Doo universe in this movie. And I mean, I think there's a reason why they became kind of as iconic as they did and why they went on to, make more appearances in the series later on. I just think it's a nice touch. And honestly, I think their music was actually pretty catchy. I don't think it's as good as Terror Time Again from Zombie Island, but I think it's still pretty damn solid.
And another pro I do want to highlight, I kind of brought this up earlier, but I do want to highlight the artwork and the animation in the movie. I love how the team behind the film did such a great job creating specifically the town of Oak Haven. I think it was just styled and designed so beautifully, and the designs of the characters too. Like, I did enjoy the design of Sarah Ravencroft's ghost. I think that that was a standout. And the animation, I think, is a standout for me. Actually, question, since we've already reviewed Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, I have to ask this. Despite the fact that the movies only came out 2 years apart, did you enjoy the animation in this movie better than Zombie Island?
I would say I'm going to say yes to that because that was actually one of my only real cons with Zombie Island was that the animation did kind of show its age a little bit because that was that time period where they were kind of switching animation styles. But by this point, things were a little bit smoother. And honestly, there's some parts of this movie that you damn near could hang on your wall as a painting.
Yeah, but now that we've talked about all our pros, why don't we move on to our cons? Do you want to start?
Yeah, I got two cons. My first one is now I know we just spent a good 90 seconds of our lives talking about how much we love Tim Curry as Ben Ravencroft in this movie, and I still do not get me wrong. But the second twist in this movie of Ben trying to revealing he's actually trying to release Sarah from the book and that Sarah was a witch and not just a healer, I wasn't as big of a fan of because I feel like they maybe broadcast that a little too much, teased it a little too much over the course of the movie because Ben kept bringing up so often that no, my ancestor was not a witch. She was persecuted. She just wanted to help people. I just feel like they're maybe overselling it a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you mean. And I think that might be one of my biggest cons with the movie is the reveal that Ben Ravencroft is the villain of the film. Although, again, I still really love Tim Curry's performance and I liked Ben Ravencroft as a character. Yeah, one of my issues is the reveal of his villainous side. Admittedly, this was never a big problem for me when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, it has become more of an issue. The reason why is because I think it just feels pretty obvious from very early on in the film that he's actually a villain. And this by no means ruins the movie. It's just an element of the story that I think could have been hidden better.
Yeah, and when we were watching this, he made a mention of anytime that they introduce a new character that tries to help out the Scooby-Doo gang, there's a 50-50 chance that they're actually secretly the villain, and this was one of those times where they turned out to actually be the villain. So again, I feel like they maybe could have teased that a little less over the course of the movie, and it would have made the second twist hit a little harder.
Yeah, I agree. But what's your other big con with the movie?
Again, not a huge con. It's kind of a weird, glaring plot hole, and that is the turkey. Now, I like the creativity of using the giant turkey as a monster in this movie, but why doesn't it turn back into a normal turkey after Sarah and Ben are trapped in the book, like all the other monsters Sarah created, like the pumpkin monsters and the tree monster and all that? Again, it's not a movie ruining plot hole by any means, and it does lead to some very funny moments. But yeah, it just feels like a bit of a weird oversight to me. It's just again, it's not a huge nitpick, but it's just like, huh.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. But I think that if I had another issue, just maybe a small one, to me, there are moments where the plot of this movie does feel kind of rushed. And this is another issue that I've had as I've gotten older. And again, while I do like the plot of this movie overall, there are elements where I think it is kind of rushed. Some of those elements are the concept of witchcraft. I think that could have been discussed and focused on a little bit more. And I think it could have made the movie a little bit scarier, specifically when it talks about the concept of being a witch versus being a Wiccan. This is something that we saw with Thorne's character. That was another aspect that I wouldn't have minded seeing explored a little bit more in depth. Once again, none of that drops the quality of the movie. It's just something that I think could have gotten a little bit more attention than it did.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that.
But on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give this movie?
I did still really enjoy this. I don't think it's as good as on Zombie Island because I think Zombie Island is a little scarier. But yeah, overall, I'd say 7.5 out of 10. Again, still really enjoyed it. It still holds up. Yeah, not really too much else to say. It's just it's another really solid Scooby-Doo special.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to have to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Not my favorite Scooby-Doo movie, but definitely one of my favorites. Yeah, I think I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. All right, guys, that's the end of this review. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you later.